culture.
I'm Adam Riley. Tonight on Greater Boston, Elizabeth Warren calls Israel's actions in Gaza genocide, and Massachusetts voters are weighing in too. GBH News' Tori Bedford joins me on Warren's comments and the latest results from the new GBH News Commonwealth Beacon poll. Then, how the war is affecting how a pair of local Democrats plan to vote in November. And finally, it's opening day at Fenway Park. Craig Lamolt joins us with scenes from the first Red Sox home game of the season. It's one of the strongest rebukes that we've heard yet from an American political leader when it comes to the war in Gaza. Here is Senator Elizabeth Warren responding to questions about Israel's tactics at a mosque in Wayland a few days back.
As an application of law, I believe they will find that it is genocide, and they have ample evidence to do so.
GBH News reporter Tori Bedford broke that story, and she joins me now to talk about what else Warren had to say and to break down new GBH News and Commonwealth Beacon polling conducted by the Massing Polling Group about how Mass residents feel about the conflict. Hey, Tori, thanks for being here. Let's start with the poll. Based on the survey that we were a part of, do people in Massachusetts support or oppose Israel's war in Gaza?
So we saw kind of a mixed result out of the 1,002 people that pollsters spoke to over that roughly 1 week period, the end of March. 40% said that they're opposed to the Israeli government's actions in Gaza, 34% support them, and 26% didn't know or refused to answer. And that's broken down, within strongly oppose or, slightly oppose. And I think 19% said that they strongly oppose.
Any interesting breakdowns demographically when it comes to how people feel, or is it across the board similar sentiments? So
I saw actually similar, in the 3 questions that I looked at about Gaza, I saw similar sentiments between people who had, highly educated, so, a college degree, an advanced degree, and then people who had a high school degree or less.
They were on the same page.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, but across the board, I think there was, when you look at these polls, and I hope that we continue to do more polling to see how these trends kind of shift. I went and looked up the Gallup polls nationally, which have, in November, we're showing, I think, a 36% approval rate for Israel, which is similar to, to our language that we used, right? Because we didn't talk about a ceasefire, we talked about approval of the Israeli government's actions. And then now, the most recent one in March, it's 55% of people are against the Israeli military's actions in Gaza.
It's a notable shift.
Yeah.
So we did ask how the U.S. should respond to the war in Gaza. What do people want to see us doing? So
47% of those surveyed said that they would like the U.S. government to intervene and to push for an immediate end to the war.
And just 21% said support Israeli leaders in the war. That's a striking finding, at least to my eyes. And what do people say about how closely they've been following this? Because it's, one of the top stories in the news every single day. Are people paying close attention?
So majority of people said that they were at least paying some attention. And most people actually said that they are paying very close attention, which I think really reflects like a shift in terms of, I would think that people at this point, 6 months in, would have a little bit of fatigue about this, which is really unfortunate and something that, we've seen with a lot of conflicts and tragedies across the world. But I think that people are seeing these horrific images on social media, and it's really causing them to want to get involved. I spoke to one activist, Ellie Gerzon, who said that, they've been doing this for 9 years, and they've never seen so many people who have never made a call to their representatives before, who've never, had any kind of political activism, want to get involved. People from all across the spectrum of, humankind want to do something.
That's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned, even though we didn't poll on it, but the role of social media when it comes to disseminating images that shape the way people think about this. That's a fascinating point. I'm glad you brought that up. You talked with Jonathan Sarna from Brandeis University. He's the head of Brandeis' Schusterman Center for Israel Studies. He argued to you that the way these questions are framed can have a big impact on how people say they feel about the war. What are some examples of what he's talking about?
So advocates for, sort of pro-Palestinian advocates said the same thing, where they were saying if you had said the word ceasefire, then it would be higher in this way. And he was saying that if there had been language in there about hostages, about the more than 100 hostages that are being held by Hamas right now, then people would remember that, because he believes that 6 months out, people are not talking about hostages as much anymore, but he pays attention to Israeli media and he pays attention to American media. And he says that, you know, in Israel, there is a lot more discussion about the hostages and they're top of mind. And there's this feeling like that could be your kid. And so that puts it, that sort of is a justification for what has otherwise shifted a lot of people's perspectives.
But tell me if I'm wrong here. My sense, and I'm not someone who tracks this on a daily basis by any means, but my sense is that families of many of the hostages have been very critical, right?
Well, that's not even just a sense. I mean, in the last week, we've seen protests in Tel Aviv where tens of thousands of people have come out, including family members of the hostages, and called on Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, to step down and are in opposition of the way that his government has handled this. Many people, even people related to people who are currently hostages, believe that, you know, the hostages are in danger from the way that the military has focused not just on getting hostages back, but also in completely getting rid of, you know, totally destroying Hamas.
Eliminate Hamas, which the Israeli military says is sheltering in civilian infrastructure, so you go after the whole thing.
Right, and I think, I mean, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, at this point, it's over 30,000 death toll for civilians, which is significant.
There does seem to be an ongoing shift in the way politicians in Massachusetts and elsewhere are talking about the conflict. As I mentioned at the beginning, you got a hold of this video in which Warren spoke at a mosque in Wayland and suggested that what's happening in Gaza right now qualifies as genocide. Let's take a look at a little more of what she had to say.
For me, it is far more important to say what Israel is doing is wrong. And it is wrong. It is wrong to starve children, women, a civilian population in order to try to bend them to your will. It is wrong to drop 2,000-pound bombs in densely populated civilian areas. I think I can make a more effective argument by describing the behavior that is happening and whether I believe it is right or wrong, and look people in the eye and say, do you want to tell me you think it is right? And that it should be the policy of the United States of America to support those actions.
Those aren't new criticisms from Senator Warren. She's been pretty consistently critical of the way the war is being waged. But I'm wondering how the crowd in the video that you got a hold of, how did they respond to Warren saying, yes, this seems like it qualifies as genocide, but it's really not a term, I'm paraphrasing here, it's really not a term I want to get focused on using here. Instead, I want to say that the war is being fought wrong, et cetera. Did they feel like she was backing away from an important piece of terminology? So
we've actually reversed the order of her comments, which makes sense for this segment, but she said that part first, and then right after she said what you just played, people said, you didn't answer the question. It was a yes or no question. Do you think it's a genocide? Okay. And then she answered, and she kind of couched it by saying, if you want to make a legal argument, she says they will find ample evidence to suggest that it, to find that it is a genocide. And she's talking about the International Court of Justice, which in January said that they had plausible evidence to suggest that it was a genocide. So she was saying that the International Court of Justice will find ample evidence to say that it is a genocide.
But she had to be pushed into offering that assessment, and it wasn't quite a full-throated, as I see it, there's no question this is genocide.
But once she said the word genocide, and she said, yes, I think you will find ample evidence that there is, the crowd it was raucous. People were clapping and cheering.
Interesting.
So I think they just wanted her to come out. And I think that is also representative of kind of a national push for politicians to be on the same page as their constituents and the importance of rhetoric, right? Because she also said that she's trying to get away from a labels argument, which she thinks can kind of put up a barrier. And I think that ties into the social media aspect of it as well, right? Like, how do we all sort of work together across the aisle? But I think that we've reached this point politically where people are saying, you can't really fence it on certain things, and we need you to come out and say the word genocide. And even though she couched it, they were very happy to hear her say that specific word.
It'll be interesting to see what she and other members of the delegation have to say. Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, said, I believe just today, that he did not see evidence that genocide was occurring. We can take a quick look at that countervailing point of view.
Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza?
Senator Cotton, we don't have any evidence of genocide being created.
So that's a no. Israel's not committing genocide in Gaza.
We don't have evidence of that, to my knowledge. Yeah.
Just to remind people, Tori, what are some recent developments that may be helping to ramp up skepticism among Massachusetts voters and United States voters more broadly when it comes to Israel's conduct in this war?
So we saw last week that Israeli airstrikes killed 7 World Central Kitchen aid employees, and that's an organization, humanitarian aid, that was coming in, that was one of the biggest suppliers of food to people in Gaza. And I think that kind of woke people up a little bit because, you know, we can look at these big numbers of 30,000 civilian deaths and then to see if they're pulling aid out, one of the organizations that was able to get in there and actually help people is now not feeling safe because they felt that they had the assurance that they would be able to do this humanitarian act. That is then, it creates this odd dichotomy where you've got the president also calling for a ceasefire while supporting an $18 billion arms bill.
That is not a dichotomy, but it seemed like that attack that you're talking about, the World Central Kitchen attack, that seemed to really animate President Biden in a way that we hadn't seen him be animated before, I think because he has some personal ties with that organization. And your point's an excellent one. Numbers as big and horrible as they can be, you can also become inured to them. The power of anecdote, the power of individual specific experience is really strong with stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, he called for a ceasefire, but at the same time, he has not stopped pushing Congress to approve this bill for F-15 fighter jets and munition and military aid and training for Israel. And so I think 40 members of the House wrote him a letter last week, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi, which is really significant that she would break with him, saying that they are opposed to this funding of military aid to Israel.
Well, like you, I hope that we continue to do more polling on this stuff so we can track the way this stuff evolves. Tori Bedford, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, is Biden losing young voters over his response to the Israel-Hamas war? While some are jumping ship and voting third party, others are hanging on for fear of the alternative, former President Trump. 2 college students in Boston met up to talk about Biden's candidacy in the latest edition of Politics in Real Life. Take a look.
If you know the candidates aren't going to win, why are you still voting for them?
Because I think it's important to try to move things forward.
This is the first time I'll be voting in a general election, and frankly, I am not excited at all to be casting my vote. I'm still voting for Biden because he's not going to move us backwards. I think he can beat Donald Trump, and I don't want to fathom another 4 years under his administration where he's pledged to do so many despicable and evil things for the people of the country.
I think my problem is there's this idea that a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for democracy. We have to save democracy. Mm-hmm. But we don't really live in a democracy if that is how our options are presented. I hope to vote for Claudia and Karina from the Party of Socialism and Liberation. They are a smaller campaign. Do I think they're going to win? No, not right now. If not them, I may have to abstain from voting because I can't vote for Joe Biden, knowing the things that I know about what's happening in Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Before October 7th, when the Israel and Palestine conflict really came to light, had he lost your vote before then?
I would have probably voted for him kind of unenthusiastically. I think his response to it is very, very telling about where his priorities are, which are clearly not with the American people, because people are hungry in America. People are without health care, they're without housing, and yet we continue to send all this aid. He continues to bypass Congress. So yeah, he totally lost my vote with that.
I've definitely become more discouraged with his handling of it. The more I read, it's a very overwhelming topic to keep myself up to date on. It's getting more disheartening, but it's very difficult for me to kind of distance myself from not voting for him, just because I've always known Democrats and Republicans are the two parties that get anywhere, like it or not.
I hear this argument about the lesser of two evils pretty consistently, and I just don't feel that is always a valid lens through which we should be viewing our politics. The choice to divest from the two parties, it's long overdue. It just, I don't know when the opportune time would be, if not now.
If you know the candidates aren't going to win, why are you still voting for them?
Because I think it's important to try to move things forward. And so I would like to vote in a way that aligns with my values most. And it does take some bravery or discomfort to try something new. But at this point, we're an empire in decline, we've got to pivot.
It's really disappointing to kind of see Biden's presidency really go downhill. I think a lot of people had a lot of faith in him from the beginning. I got older and I got increasingly more disappointed. So I am voting for him, but it's not something I'm excited to do. I think it went really well. It was very fulfilling to hear another perspective. I'm still voting the same way that I was planning to. I think this taught me a lot about the importance of not just talking, but actually doing things. We won't move forward if we don't start.
I think that we share many of the same opinions and perspectives. However, I will still be voting for my candidate of choice.
Finally, tonight, spring weather is here again, and so are the Red Sox, who are back at Fenway for their home opener against the Baltimore Orioles. GBH News' Craig Lamoult joins me now from Jersey Street. Craig, good to see you. What is the mood or the feeling or the vibe at Fenway Park right now?
It's great. I mean, it's basically jubilation. Opening day is always a big deal in Boston. And, for some people, it's an annual tradition to come here to Fenway Park on opening day. For others, it's a dream come true. It's something they've always wanted to do. And basically from everybody I've been hearing, it's just the sense that, this is official. Spring is really here. Here's what some fans told me.
First day at opening day, first day in Boston, first day at Fenway. I'm ecstatic. I cried when I walked around from the subway station. So I've loved the Sox for 35 years, and this is a dream come true.
The weather's beautiful. Red Sox are in town. What's better?
Yeah. Good, man. Good. Yeah, we're pumped. We're so pumped to be here. I did my first opening day. My wife surprised me. Yeah.
Honestly, super stoked. 20-year anniversary of 2004 Sox. Everything, but especially everything with Wake too. This is a big day. It means a lot to be here, to be able to celebrate everything with everyone.
Craig, I grew up a Minnesota Twins fan, and I've never entirely kicked that habit. But the impression that I had is that people were pretty down on the Red Sox last year, and in recent years, there hasn't been a lot to cheer about. Is there optimism about this coming season, or is it more like, here's a rite of spring, and now they're going to be bad once again?
Well, I mean, we're coming off 2 last-place finishes in the AL East here, and I think everybody, was pretty down before, but I'm definitely hearing a lot of optimism now. There was a away stand before this home opener, and they won 7 of 10 games, and, I'm hearing a lot of optimism from the fans here.
World Series or bust. Gotta win. Good team, good roster, good management, good everything. It's time. fans deserve it.
I feel like we'll do well. Our starting pitching is doing well as well, surprisingly well.
The start is much better than I thought it was going to be, so, you know, fingers crossed to keep it going. Hopefully we'll do better at home this year than last year.
We heard someone in an earlier clip mention Tim Wakefield. There is a ceremony, the late Tim Wakefield. There's a ceremony honoring the 2004 team that broke Boston's World Series drought going on today. What exactly is happening with that?
Yeah, there was a beautiful opening ceremony as the game kicked off. As you mentioned, it's the 20th anniversary of the Red Sox winning the 2004 series in spectacular fashion, being 3 games behind the Yankees in the ALCS and then coming back to win that 7-game series and then sweep the World Series. So there's a lot of nostalgia right now for that team 20 years later, but also some sadness because, as you mentioned, Tim Wakefield, who was a pitcher for the 2004 team, a knuckleballer, he passed away in October of cancer. Also, Larry Lucchino, who's president and CEO of the team at that time, he passed away recently as well. And they were both remembered in a beautiful ceremony this morning. They had a long video montage, the entire length of Don McLean's American Pie. And there was really not a dry eye in the house, I would say. I mean, a lot of people, it was actually a really emotional thing to remember that team and also to honor those important players who lost recently.
I have to ask you, before we wrap up, is there a secret to your getting this excellent assignment on this beautiful spring day to go hang out at Fenway Park? Because if there is a secret, if you're comfortable sharing it with me, either on camera or off camera, I'd love to hear what it is.
I don't know. I was going to say you just got to stick around long enough, but you've been around longer than I, so I don't know how I got to be here today. But it's not the worst assignment I've ever gotten. Let me just put it that way. And I'm going to go try and enjoy the rest of the game here.
Excellent. I'm glad that you're going to be able to do that. I actually used to work right around the corner back when I worked at the Boston Phoenix, and seeing you out there today is making me nostalgic. So, Craig Lamalt, good to talk to you about this stuff. Enjoy.
Thanks so much. Great to talk to you.
That's it for tonight, but do come back tomorrow. Craig Lamalt will be back in the host seat. He'll be taking a look at the dangers of offshore wind farms for the endangered North Atlantic right whale. Plus, what's a trad wife? The term's all over social media, but what does it actually mean for women? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. I'm Adam Riley. Good night.
Now, it might not be that shocking to see a bear climbing around in a tree, but you might be surprised to find out that that tree is right here in Massachusetts. Yes, bears are emerging from their long winter's nap all across the Bay State right now, so it is the perfect time to brush up on our bear safety best practices. The American black bear has called New England home for thousands, if not millions of years. But by the 1970s, estimates had their numbers at less than 100 here in Massachusetts. Now, there are 4,000 to 5,000 of them, and in March and April, they all have the same thing on their minds.
Bears are driven to find food. They haven't eaten anything for 4 to 5 months, so they're extremely hungry.
In early spring, nature's best offering is something called skunk cabbage, which is about as good as it sounds. But as bears push further east into Massachusetts and into more populated places, they are increasingly finding an alternative, the human backyard.
Just out of the corner of my eye out the side window, saw movement and just looked over here and realized there's a giant bear in the tree. We've seen bears in the area before, but the first time openly in the yard, just hanging out and enjoying a nice snack.
So we brought in the state's foremost bear expert to learn why Jillian's house might have been attractive to bears and find out what you can do to avoid a bear visit to your home.
Habitat configurations like this, where you have houses within forest blocks, are very common. There's a wetland in a forested area across the street. Those are natural habitats that the bear's going to use. That's the big challenge we have, is trying to get people to learn what they need to do around their home to coexist with bears.
Exhibit A, the humble bird feeder.
There's no such thing as a bird feeder. A bird feeder is a wildlife feeder.
Okay. Exhibit A, the humble wildlife feeder.
It's thousands of calories. So I've heard estimates that it's like 4 cheese pizzas worth of food right there. And there's a bird feeder that's that many calories. There's another one. If they go 3 houses down, there's another one. And quite often when the bear empties one, someone refills it again the next day.
They must have a really good sense of smell. I can't smell anything. A smell even I can't miss is a backyard barbecue, and bears can detect the feast even after it's over. Grease traps and dirty grill grates can bring out the beast.
Clean up those sources of food.
So the party in the backyard where everybody was eating and you're like, nah, we'll get it tomorrow.
You may have a visitor overnight.
Backyard chicken coops have become increasingly common in recent years, providing bears with yet another place to go looking for a meal.
You can't build a coop that can keep a bear out. They can just crack into it like an egg. So we're trying to really encourage the public to use electric fencing to protect their chickens.
And it's not just in cartoons that bears like honey, so you'll want to keep those beehives behind an electric fence too. Bears might get into your compost pile, but it's not a favorite. More attractive, tasty bags of trash. So A+ for this.
A+ for this. This is what we like to see.
Yeah.
They're in there. They're in a can where the bears can't access it. And then the recommendation is putting it out the morning of trash pickup so that it's not out overnight and bear can easily knock over that trash can, get into it.
Keep in mind that all of this is not just about protecting your property.
If bears learn to try to find food around their homes, it often ends up badly for the animal. People often tell us, I don't mind having the bear in my yard or at my bird feeder. But that same bear that's now learned to find food in your yard goes across town and breaks into someone's chicken coop, and the person shoots it.
Of course, despite our best efforts, a bear encounter is always a possibility. Now, in general, bears are not naturally aggressive towards humans, but
it's important to remember that they are a large and powerful animal, and so you want to respect that. You don't want to try to get closer to get a better picture or get a selfie or what have you. Enjoy the sighting, but do it from a distance.
I was definitely having a conversation through the glass with the bear.
What were you saying to him?
I think along the lines of, good morning, hope you're enjoying your breakfast.
Do you kind of hope he comes back at some point?
There's
just between you and me.